Well, I had hoped that the self-timer would work so I could get in front of the camera without showing my back to everybody and in a very unprofessional way. But when you're doing everything by yourself, there are certain compromises. So I compromise, and I guess my viewers compromise. So I'm doing a little series on meditation and the spiritual path and things that I've picked up along the way. This morning I'm going to talk a little bit about beginning. My favorite audience is beginners. And the reason is that generally, with very few exceptions, people that have been practicing a long time think they know it all. And even if they don't have a teacher, they are very much confused by the practice itself, thinking that because you meditate 1 hour a day or 5 hours a day, or you've studied for 20 years, that's a sign of some sort of accomplishment or realization. And this creates a wall that's almost impossible to get through. Whereas somebody that never practiced before, or practiced with very good instructions from a good teacher, they know that they have a lot to learn. And this is something that is very interesting phenomena, how people that are that are just beginning are very open to instruction. And people that are very advanced and have had really great instruction are also very open to instructions. And I'll tell you a somewhat humorous story in this regard about how a very accomplished meditator could be open to being taught. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to unknowingly give a lesson to Dzongsa Rinpoche. Some of you may have heard of him from The Cup, the film that won the Best Foreign Film of the Year. He is the son of Tinley Norbu, who is the son of the great master Dudjom Rinpoche. And Dzongsa Rinpoche is one of the leading teachers, one of the top 10 teachers in the world right now. And one day, many years ago, I wandered into a monastery and I saw a monk sitting down with a recorder listening to what I didn't have any idea what he was listening to. But I assumed he was listening to music. Now, he may have been listening to a tape of a teaching for all I know. But I was very arrogant and proud. I had been a monk for 10 years myself, and I had received excellent instructions, and I was very into the Vinaya, which is the rules of conduct. So I walked up to Dzongsa Rinpoche, not knowing it was Dzongsa Rinpoche, and I sat down next to him and I said, you know, you're in monk robes and you've got these earphones on. And if you were a lay person, that might be okay, but since you're wearing the robes of the Buddha, you should not be listening to any kind of music or entertainment whatsoever, because you should be setting an example for others. And then he took off the earphones and he looked at me and he says, "You know, you're right. And I actually should be setting a better example than I am." And he put the recording stuff away, and after that, we chatted for a while, and then I went my way. And it was only a few minutes later that someone told me who I was speaking to. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. And why we can always, we always have room, a lot of room to learn. And if we're entering the path and just beginning practicing the Dharma, we're actually in a very, very good space. And we have an opportunity, especially today, to seek out good instruction and listen to good discourse and read very good books. When I first began practicing the Dharma 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot available as far as reading material goes, and much of it was by scholars and who were excellent. D.T. Suzuki, for example, Alan Watts, and some of these, they were very good scholars and translators, but often they lacked experiential realization and the ability to transmit the text through their words. And oftentimes they were the sole translator of a text, whereas now we have translation groups. Buddhist Text Translation Society is a Chinese organization that comes to mind. The Padmakara Translation Group is another one. Shambhala has a translation group. So this is excellent because not only you have a translation, but you have a translation that's been poured over by several translators and often certified by their teacher. In the case of the Padmakara Translation Group, they often will have 4 or 5 translators on a translation, and then that's certified by their teacher. The same is true before the passing of the Master Xuanhua. The Buddhist Text Translation Society also had their texts certified by the Master. So if we're beginning Buddhism today, we have this advantage of excellent translations available. In addition, teachers are traveling all throughout the world these days, so we can receive good instructions. Now, there's a caveat to all of this. There always is, isn't there? So let's look at it. With quantity, as always, there's problems of quality. So, and we have to be very, very good shoppers if we're going out and receiving instructions. It's not enough to just get instructions. We have to check out the lineage of the teacher and see where he's coming from. His Holiness the Dalai Lama offers excellent advice on receiving instructions with a new teacher. He says that when you go to a Dharma teaching and you're not familiar with the teacher and you're beginning, you should go with attitude of attending a lecture instead of a Dharma initiation or a Dharma teaching. You should just go with an attitude of attending a lecture, like if you were at a university. And then just, Dalai Lama humorously says, you should sniff like a dog. You should sniff from behind, sniff on the side, sniff in the front, and sniff out the teacher really well. And see, you know, who his teacher was, what monastic vows he keeps, which monastery he came from, has he graduated from as a monk, and is he qualified to teach? In the Gelugpa tradition, it's a 17-year course to become a geshe. That's considered a teacher in the Gelugpa tradition, which is the tradition of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In the tradition of the Kagyu and the Shakyapa and the Nyingmapa, all the three other schools of the four schools of Buddhism, other than the Gelugpa, they're called Kempos. And a Kempo, similar to the Gelugpas, they have to receive 17 years of education in order to receive the Kempo degree. So, and this is very, very difficult study. It typically starts at 5 a.m. and ends around 9 in the evening. So these monks undergo rigorous training to become Kempos or Geshes. So when we receive teachings, when we go to a teaching of a teacher we're not familiar with, we should first of all see if he has a degree, if he's lived in a monastery. If he's a monk, he should ideally would have a Geshe or a Kempo degree. And also we should look into who his teacher is. Is he from a monastery, and has he received the instructions to teach? Generally, a teacher will instruct his students to teach if he thinks that they're qualified. So these are the kinds of things we should look into. And then, of course, reputation. Is the teacher without blemishes, scandals, and so forth? Another thing I always look for when I'm not familiar with the teacher is the fee, how much the teaching is costing to attend. This isn't because I'm poor or anything. I can afford to go to teachings. But it's because it's a red flag if the teaching seems exorbitant. I remember once, just very recently, going to New York to visit a friend who I was a monk with many years ago. And it just so happened when I went to visit him, I've only seen him in 40 years, probably two or three times. I was invited to stay with them for a few days, and I did. And he and his wife were attending a teaching. So they asked me if I wanted to go. I said, of course. So then they said, well, we'll get your tickets. So it turned out, I said, well, how much is a ticket? They said, well, it's $1,000 for 3 days or something like that. So it was basically $300 per ticket. I said, I think that's kind of ridiculous. And then they said, well, do you want us to pay for you? I said, no, it's not about that. It's about the cost of the ticket. And then parking was like $75 a day. So to me, this is a sign that something is off. So I paid my tickets for 3 days, and I went to the teaching. but I still don't feel right about it. And the venue that the teaching was held in certainly didn't cost the money that was taken in. When His Holiness the Dalai Lama teaches in India, he teaches for free. There's never a charge. And when he teaches abroad, which he often does, there's always an accounting after the teaching. How much the venue costs, how much air transportation costs, etc. And then when the accounting is all finished, if there's anything left over, His Holiness generally donates it to a hospital or to a school or for an organization for children's welfare and so forth. So there's no profit involved. So, and my own teacher, who I spent 10 years with, taught every night for free and twice on Saturday and Sunday, and never a charge. And moreover, there was a free lunch on weekend teachings, and anybody who came into the monastery was always given food for no charge. So look at the cost of any teaching that you contemplate going to. If it seems like it's unreasonable, it probably is. The Buddha forbade the selling of the Dharma. So a teaching is actually supposed to be a non-profit event. No one is supposed to be buying beautiful cars or living in luxury hotels on the money that's taken in from a Dharma teaching. And if you think that the teaching is expensive, you could probably do better watching a video at home. There's many videos on different Dharma lectures that have been given over the years by authentic teachers. So the obvious point here is that if we're considering entering the path of meditation, of course we have to meditate. But what's often neglected is good instructions. So when we enter the path, we don't want to just, hear that reciting Om Mani Padme Hum is a good thing to do and just sit down and recite that, or do any other, stare at a wall or stare at a candle, stare at a Buddha image. It should be complemented and supported. All those things I just mentioned are good, watching the breath, etc. But we also want to support our practice by good instruction, whether it comes live instructions from the qualified teacher or through the study of books, good books, authentic teachings. Another thing that I haven't mentioned is good companionship, the importance of having fellow practitioners on the path that we associate with, trade notes with. This is called a Sangha, technically. We also want to support our practice through our own lifestyle. This is probably the most important support of all, because if our lifestyle is going in a different direction as our so-called spiritual or meditative life, it's completely useless. It's like it makes a very bad soup. So basically, if we're entering the spiritual path, it entails like also living in a certain way, a disciplined way. And this doesn't even have to be studied. It's like common sense. It's basically what we've been taught in the Bible and taught by even for non-religious intuitions. Generally would support a spiritual practice if they were followed. And just practice the 10 Commandments, that's enough. Anyway, the way we live should be in accord with the way, with our spiritual ambitions. So the way we live our lives should not clash with the meditations we are doing, with the teachings we are receiving. And that's why I can't emphasize enough the importance of right companionship and practicing with a Sangha. The Buddha says, if you associate with gold, you become like gold. If you associate with silver, you become like silver. If you associate with iron, you become like iron. And basically our associations rub off on us. And so we want to have, as much as possible, associations with people we regard at least as our equal, or better yet, our superiors. Because we will grow faster. It's obvious. It's just like, not just in the Dharma that it works like this. If you're a biologist, a chemist, a physicist, a quantum mechanic professor, the people that your colleagues are going to be a big influence on how far you go. So we want good colleagues in the Dharma. One of the biggest mistakes we make as beginners